Today it comes from Deuteronomy 32. Remember the days of old. Consider the years long past. Ask your father, and he will inform you, your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided humankind, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of gods. The Lord's own portion was his people. Jacob was allotted share. He sustained him in a desert land, in a howling wilderness waste. He shielded him, cared for him, guarded him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, as it spreads its wings, takes them up, and bears them aloft on its pinions, the Lord alone guided him. No foreign god was with him.
My bad.
Tell me you have good insurance.
Yep, I've got...
Allstate.
Really? Was some cut rate policy?
Nope, I've got...
The Allstate Value Plan. It's their most affordable car insurance, and you still get an Allstate agent.
I too have
Allstate.
same agent and everything.
It's like we're connected.
No, we're not.
Yeah, we are.
No, we're not.
The Allstate Value Plan. Dollar for dollar, nobody protects you like Allstate.
Yes, this morning's service is brought to you by Allstate Insurance. We have a little trustees are just trying to bring a little extra income in. You got to understand. Well, this morning we are, graduating 20 seniors. You know, I feel a personal connection to you because you were freshmen, just starting your high school experience when I was just starting my countryside experience, and now you're leaving us, you're flying away. Where some of you, I know, you're staying quite close. Some of you are, our seniors are going to Creighton University, and others are going to UNO, so they'll be right here. Others of our seniors are going to places slightly more exotic, like Kansas. But whether they're staying physically close or going far, if you've been there and done that on the whole college trip, you know that there's a very long distance internally between high school and college, no matter how close the physical distance really is. You know, in high school, you know, you kind of own the world. The world is infinite in all directions. It just seems limitless, and you're only limited by really your imagination and maybe a few parental controls like, you know, car keys and curfews. But when you get to college, that world that seemed infinite in all directions seems rather on the small side. It's like a parking lot compared to the wide open expanse of it all. There are ideas that you have in high school that stimulate your thoughts, but then in college you discover that people have taken those very thoughts way further down the road than you ever even dreamed possible. There they've built whole cities, even civilizations and belief systems revolving around those very beliefs. The world becomes very, very large. In college, it's like you're given the keys to a very fast car with a very big engine. You hit that accelerator, you peel out of that parking lot, and you go explore that wide open terrain. But I hope you choose cars that have airbags in them, and you buckle up because you're in for one wild ride. You'll find, at least if you're like me, you'll find that there are few road maps that show you exactly where to go in your college experience, and you'll find the road is full of potholes in places and sudden twists and turns. You're likely to spin out of control once in a while, and because there's so many people out on the road with you, being your classmates, your professors, and even those you metaphorically read in books. They're out on the road with you too. There's likely once in a while, well, to be one of these. In fact, College is nothing, if nothing else, is a series of collisions also that take place, collisions of worldviews and of old ways of thinking and new ones and so forth. So there's a lot of that happening out there too. But that's not a bad thing, actually, as we'll find. You want to have those kinds of collisions on a fairly regular basis, so long as you're buckled up a bit. But it's not all about collisions, of course. It really is about exploring that wide open territory. And you'll find, for instance, you might be out there driving, and there'll be a neon sign of the philosophy department. It'll be flashing to come on, eat at its diner, and there you may have a meal with Friedrich Nietzsche and Karl Marx and Albert Camus and Jacques Derrida and people you've never even heard of, and if you'll actually sit with them and pay attention to what they're saying, listen to them deeply, you'll find even people who challenge you mightily, they have some pretty brilliant ideas. They've got some pretty interesting stuff to share at that table. But also eventually some of them may suggest that, for instance, the faith that you've been developing here at Countryside is really a grand fiction. That it's just some pious kind of wishful thinking that will placate us in order to not face the terror of our great aloneness in the universe. That will cause you to experience an opiate that will simply lull you into not standing up for social justice and fighting against the injustices of the world, because you'll be dreaming for a great pie in the sky in the great by and by. They'll tell you that the key to happiness is not faith, but the sheer power of human will and intellect. So I hope you bring a couple antacids for some of those meals you may share there. But down the road, you may find the fruit and vegetable stands set up by the economics department. They will show you vegetables that are organic, raised in the pure fertilizer of pure economic, micro and macroeconomic theory. And if you'll eat those vegetables and fruits, you'll find some of them are very, very tasty indeed. If you show promise and interest, they may even invite you to work on their organic farm that supplies that fruit stand, and they'll teach you ways to raise fruit, they will say, and vegetables that are free of artificial additives like religion and belief. And really, that's helpful to learn how to do those very things. But they'll also tell you then the key to happiness is not faith, but marginal utility. But even that will be instructive if you'll really pay attention to them. Now, on down the road, you'll find all kinds of roadside attractions, diners, fruit stands, vegetable stands, flower shops, all these things set up by the different departments that you'll experience and the different ways of being in the world and knowing in the world. And some of them will be friendly to faith, and others will have signs saying, check your belief at the door. No cynicism, no skepticism, no service. And you know what? I would go through those doors. It's okay to, in a sense, have times where we check our faith and we learn something on its own terms. Try to listen very deeply. And sometimes we discover that our faith grows through setting it aside and not simply positing God in everything. We learn that sometimes we fill God in simply where we don't know what's happening. And these will show us ways of being in the world and understanding the world that are quite different. So the problem is not that you're going to college and it's all godless. God is vibrantly in college, and there are plenty of gods to be found in college life, and a great, fantastic world to explore. The problem that many of us find when we go to college, though, is we get so excited about the beliefs that we forget to pick our faith back up at the door and as we move further. Or we look at our faith and realize, compared to what I'm learning, this is pretty small and it's kind of immature. It doesn't taste so great. And so many college students decide, well, because of that, perhaps we'll just leave the faith and go on down the road. What they don't realize when they do that, though, is that faith matures at the same rate that you do. It's still growing. Even when you don't tend it, the more you grow and mature and learn, the better and tastier this whole way of being in the world is. If you'll keep taking that with you and setting it aside, learning and picking it up again, setting it aside, picking it up again, you'll find that by the end of college, that faith will have become a great tree of life that will nurture and sustain you through all kinds of life experiences. But, if you have a similar college experience like me, you'll also find that as much as we tell you we love you and so forth, and that the faith is a really strong resource, and we hope you keep it with you all the life, a lot of college people, when they get off to college, they leave their church, and they discover suddenly it's like absence, like complete absence, almost as if their church said, hey, have a nice life, come back again when you have babies, and there's no continuity, there's no ability to explore that faith like you've been exploring before. A lot of colleges won't offer that, but what I have to wonder about the way college life is today, including as far back as when I went to school, and that was a long time ago, the mainline church, churches were very, very scantily represented. They almost had nothing to do with college students. I thought, this is weird. I've been growing this great, vibrant faith. People tell me I'm loved beyond my wildest imagination. God's always here for me. And suddenly, into this vacuum, like where I can't hear anything about faith. I can't explore it very deeply. There was no campus ministry, for instance, where I went to school that would really help me continue to explore that. And that just seems kind of strange. It almost, in college, you find that your faith not only grows through the maturing that takes place in the sun of intellectual inquiry, but also it grows through crisis. In college, you experience kind of crisis after crisis, and that's a good thing. It'll grow your faith. But where are we in the mainline church than when our students are going through some of the greatest drama that they've experienced in their whole life, asking these really deep, fundamental questions about who am I? What am I here for? What should I be doing with the time in my life? And having a million different people and concepts weighing in about that. It's college, where you really do, for the first time, confront some really, really difficult, even though they may be engaging, questions. And we're just going to say, hey, see ya, as a mainline church, as a whole. Huh? And it gets worse when you discover, if you are a college student and you find this absence and you go a little looking for religion on the college campuses. A lot of the religions have set up their roadside stands there, but they have signs on them that make us think that, well, maybe that's not the faith that I've come to know, the kind of love and grace that I've come to know in my own faith. And so you think, there's all kinds of people saying, there is no God, and there's all kinds of ways that we're learning that we make realize our faith has actually been kind of smallish, and then we look at this and say, well, is this where faith is? And look, whoa, where is the mainline church? Over the years, we used to have robust presence on campuses, helping support our own students as they left for college. By the time I got to college, there was next to nothing. Most mainline entities had pulled their funding, all funding, and now it's just a fraction of that. Now, lest you think I'm working on ruining Baccalaureate Sunday, there's hope in this whole equation, far more hope than what may be realized. First of all, there are churches out there. There are robust ministries out there that will help you grow and develop and will not ask you to simply hold the same belief that you had when you were a child and never develop. That will actually encourage you to develop and explore and challenge yourself. There are some great ministries out there if you'll go looking for them. And even though a lot of mainline churches are right next to campus and they do a lousy job of reaching out, their idea of outreach is to put a little notice in the campus bulletin and then completely ignore every college student that comes in. If you search, you can actually find places that actually care. And even, I went to a church like that had lousy campus outreach. It was right next to Whitman College campus, virtually, stone's throw away, and I was the only college student, going. And yet, in my time there, I found that even they offered me something that was vital and that was valued. In fact, my connections to that church lasted far beyond my connections to the professors and the students at that school when I'd go back and visit. So even in a church that's doing a lousy job, you can find something worthy of digesting and exploring that will help you in your path. And at Countryside Church itself, we haven't simply been absent from our own college students. I mean, we have so many relationships that we've developed with you over the years, just through our connections with Koyo and Faith Singers and so forth. A lot of those connections continue well beyond Countryside. And currently we're setting up a ministry, a group. Margie Bolte is assembling a group of interested adults who are interested in actually helping to support you more, learning ways that we can continue our connection with you as you go through college life. And there are ways that we can help you that you may not even realize, and support you that you may not have ever realized, but you may just realize in college. You may have, some of you may have gone to the Frank Schaefer lecture here that the Center for Faith Studies sponsored last winter. And Frank Schaefer he and his family were really responsible for providing the intellectual foundation for the resurgence of Christian fundamentalism in America in the early 70s and 80s. And Frank has gone a complete 180 on his own faith journey and came here to speak about that. Well, Frank speaks at a lot of college campuses. He's frequently invited because of this kind of life-changing faith that he had experienced, this change of faith. So he's all over the country, always speaking. And recently he wrote an article in the Huffington Post and posted a similar one on his blog, talking about his experience on college campuses in the United States. You may be interested in what Frank had to say. He was looking specifically at the mainline church and asking what I've just been asking, like, where are you? Where are you? And Frank had an extra note of urgency in that, because what Frank was talking about was there had been all kinds of evangelically raised children or fundamentalist children who then graduate, and in college, they enter college and they are shedding some of some of their faith isn't working for them. Like reading the Bible literally is not working for them anymore, or condemning all other people but Christians to hell is not working for them anymore. They're starting to get attuned to ways that we can act in just ways, socially just in the world, for instance, as well. They're starting to key into, maybe science and faith can actually it seems like they don't need to be enemies anymore. And there's rafts of evangelicals who are leaving the churches of their fathers and mothers, and they're looking for the exact kind of theology the mainline church has been into and exploring for over a century. But they've never heard of us, and they've grown up suspicious of us all, like we represent the Antichrist or something. So he's saying, where are you mainliners? You've got tens of thousands of students who are aching to find just what you represent. Where are you? Where are you? Well, Frank, in his explorations, says he'd found just 3 mainline outreaches that have promised to actually significantly engage college students in a sustainable and way that would be of interest to them. Happily, one of those ways, the fact first on his list, was this little internet program that can stream directly into college dorms that represent the exact theology that these college students are looking for. That program, you may have heard of it. It's called Darkwood Brew. Darkwood Brew. And through Darkwood Brew, we can actually continue to connect with you every week, should you care to, or gather groups of people and experience this along with us. But as much as Frank was talking about how Darkwood Brew represents a cutting edge in outreach in our college campuses, what makes me particularly happy is that Darkwood Brew is not the cutting edge of Countryside Church. Countryside Church is the cutting edge of Darkwood Brew. There's nothing that's being offered at Darkwood Brew that isn't being lived and experienced and explored right here, by everyone in our church. And what's being lived and explored here, quite frankly, is breathtaking to me. It puts me to my knees on a regular basis to see how the Spirit is working through our congregation and what we're up to and what we are discovering together on this journey, all of which I think can be offered to others in a very fruitful way. I would say what's happening at Countryside Church is, if I were to put a label on it, I would call it something like convergence Christianity. Convergence Christianity. What is convergence Christianity? Well, convergence Christianity is the product of a whole lot of, not just convergences, collisions. Collisions of different people with different background kind of colliding and discovering, like in that Allstate commercial, oh, we got more in common than we recognize. In fact, some common ground that maybe that we value more than our disputes with each other. And maybe in the process of talking together, they discover, oh, we were headed to the same movie too. Let's walk together. They get to know each other. What's been happening in Christianity across the country that we are very deeply tapped into is that there are people of the evangelical church, the classic evangelical fundamentalist church, and people in the classic liberal church, all of whom are saying the way of being in the world that I grew up with is not working for me anymore. There are assumptions being made, ways of being that don't work to me. It's like the car is not running for me anymore. Frank Schaeffer identified some of those problems that people are responding to in the evangelical church. But also in the liberal church, there have also been problems. People leaving the classically liberal church, saying, for instance, just as much as the evangelicals will be rigid doctrinally about theology, we can be rigid doctrinally politically or socially. And it seems like in the liberal church, what has happened over the years is we've defined ourselves more through what we're not than what we are. We've said whatever the fundamentalists do badly, we won't do it all. They do the Bible badly, we won't do the Bible. They do Jesus badly, well, we won't do Jesus. They do prayer badly, well, we won't do prayer. We basically defined ourselves by what you're not and left ourselves with very little that has energy to it or attraction or vitality. So there's all kinds of people who have left the liberal church and the conservative church who are out now, kind of post-liberals, post-evangelicals. And what's happening is their paths are crossing, sometimes colliding. And as they get out of the car thinking, oh, you're one of those people, and you're one of those people because they're used to being distrustful of each other from their previous experiences in church, they get out and they realize, hey, we got the same agent. Hey, we were going to the same film. Let's walk together. Let's talk together. And they discover that each other bears gifts now and blessings that the other was yearning for. So a classic post-liberal looks at the post-evangelical and says, my gosh, you actually think Jesus is important, and care deeply about him. I do too. You care about personal spiritual path and developing. You see that as a high value, worthy of privileging over many other values. I've been yearning for that too. You value the Bible, and what, you're not reading it literally anymore? That's cool. I do too. Each tradition has found that these post-liberals, post-evangelicals have found that they've left the baggage behind of their traditions and are carrying these very deep blessings that are beginning to converge with each other into a very vibrant form of faith. That's the kind of faith that we are living, breathing, and practicing here at Countryside Church. But curiously enough, this isn't something new. This is not a new phenomenon. In fact, what's happening at Countryside Church is connected to a very old phenomenon, one that goes back to the very, very most ancient, earliest days of Israel. Chris read for me this morning from one of the oldest passages in the Hebrew Scriptures. Scholars date this passage to somewhere around 50 to 100 years after the Exodus from Egypt. I mean, this is early stuff, between 1250 and 1150 BC. A full half a millennium older than a lot of the writings, most of the writings, in fact, of the Bible. Very early stuff. And what was the kind of window into the faith that earliest Scripture bore witness to? Something, did you catch it? Something shocking? Were you shocked by what you heard this morning? No? Were you paying attention to what you heard this morning? Oh, well, maybe we ought to rehearse just one of the lines that maybe just kind of went by you. You're so used to just kind of tuning out maybe. I don't know. When it talks about when the early days when God set up the world, created the world, who they call the Most High God. When the Most High God apportioned the nations, when he divided humankind, he fixed the boundaries of the people according to the number of gods. Gods? I thought Israelite faith was monotheistic. They believed only in the existence of one God. But then again, they call this God, their God, the high God, most high God. Well, you can't get a most high God unless there are other gods that God is higher than. And dividing the nations according to the number of gods? Well, in fact, the Israelite faith in its earliest origins was not monotheistic. They actually believed in the real existence of many gods. In fact, they believed those gods were B'nai Elohim. That's the word that's translated gods here. Sons of God. Sons of the most, related to the Most High God, Yahweh. Yeah. And there's a lot of passages in the Scriptures that speak of this. It just kind of goes over our head because we all think, we're not raised to think of anything but a monotheistic faith. So, but they weren't like the polytheistic people of their nations either. They're like the typical polytheistic nations. They have all these gods, and they're all fighting with each other all the time. They're always vying for power. The Greek dramas are all made from fighting between the gods. In Israelite religion, it was different. Scholars call it monolatric, meaning like polytheism, they believed in many gods, but unlike polytheism, they believed that only one God had any power. And that the only power and authority of all the other gods was directly given by the high God. So there was no fighting. The gods could only act in conformance to the high God's will. Well, my purpose this morning isn't to give you, some lecture now about how monolatry turned into monotheism or anything. But how Israelite came to this monolatric faith, this belief in a high God, is very interesting. I just want to take a couple minutes on this because it has something to do with what's going on here. You see, ancient Israel, it was a very small country. And the earliest Israelites dwelt in only a tiny part of this small country, up in the hill country. They were largely outcasts, people who were on the run from the law, people who were poor, people who didn't fit into everyday society, people who had escaped from Egypt as slaves. They were all kind of up there, and they all had these very different beliefs. They all believed in this God, which they originally called El, actually, but they eventually called it Yahweh, this God. They all believed in this one God that kind of united them, but they all believed all kinds of different things about who this Yahweh God was. So, what happens? Well, being in a small territory, you got a lot of people running around up there, kind of like in college, you got a lot of people driving on that road. They run into each other once in a while. In fact, they run into each other frequently. They ran into each other on those hills over like land use and water rights and ownership of property and cattle and women. Yes, women were in those days. All kinds of things like this. They collided with each other. And in those days, if you collided with somebody, you had a dispute, you called upon your God to bear witness for justice for you. And so they both kind of get out of their cars, take out their insurance card, and start praying. Oh, we got the same agent. Huh. And there was something about the love that they had for that agent that transcended the disputes they were having with each other. I mean, some of them loved this agent so much because this agent had delivered them from slavery in Egypt. That's how great their love for this agent was. And so once they found out they had the same agent, they would talk to each other. They would look for other ways to solve their problems. They might discover, hey, we were going to the same movie together. Let's talk. And eventually they would marry each other and have meals together and so forth. And they start sharing their faith, and they discover that while they believed in the same God, they had different ideas about who this God was. And as they worked out who this God was in relationship to others, they realized that there were some beliefs about this God that were very, very smallish, and that the other person bore gifts, insights about this God that were very, very marvelous and wonderful. And so you can imagine after centuries of collisions and convergence, more and more the beliefs associated with Yahweh that were very smallish go away, give way to a love that is very, very great. A love great enough to embrace all people. So, Israelites weren't particularly concerned about all these other gods of all the other nations. They felt that they were simply servants of the high God. And while they had no interest in worshiping these other gods of other nations, they never had the equivalent of the Billy Graham crusade to try to evangelize them. They had this intuition, I think, that over time and more collisions and convergences in those religions, as smallish concepts of their own deity were shed, giving way to the more expansive concepts and better and life-bearing, that perhaps over time those deities too would begin to resemble the Most High God. Perhaps over time the faith of the children would go to represent, to embody the life of the Most High God. And so they weren't particularly worried about evangelizing. They believed more in the power of convergence than evangelism. So these days, liberals and conservatives, they've left behind the baggage, the broken cars of their tradition. They're coming in pockets in the United States, countryside being one of many pockets, where a new faith is being formed that's very old. It's not like the two are just simply coming together. We're not just simply a blending of fundamentalism and liberalism. We are post and coming together, kind of like a swirl ice cream cone. None of us are losing our identity in the process. It's just that we become part of the great swirl, and the product of that cone is greater tasting than the sum total of each of the parts combined. So as you are at college, I hope you'll stop by the philosophy diner. I hope you'll buy fruit and vegetables from the economic stands, and I hope you will explore those places that will let you bring your faith inside, and I hope you'll explore those places that will say, check your faith at the door. But I hope you'll also remember to pick it back up again once you go further down that road, and I hope you'll stop once in a while at the ice cream stand of Countryside Community Church, which will be coming directly into your dorm room any day of the week that you should care to join us. Together, I hope all of us at Countryside and in college will have more and more collisions, more and more convergences, letting go of our puny understandings of God and letting ourselves go into a higher understanding of our Most High God.